What's going on YouTube? So today, really quick video, I brought both of these bikes to the track to see which one was faster, and I was very surprised. I've owned and raced a lot of bikes over the previous years, and on paper, this Aprilia should really be one of the fastest bikes I've owned, but that's just not the case. It was actually one of the slowest bikes. A quick Google search and you can see the Aprilia should make one of the best power to weight ratios, which is huge in the bike world. And you look up the R1 and it's got a huge weight disadvantage, probably 50 pounds heavier than the Aprilia. So according to Google here, this is the R1, 454 pounds. And this is the Aprilia coming in at under 400 pounds. Now these weight ratings might not be exact, but it gives you a rough idea. And being on the bike, it does feel pretty accurate. Both of these bikes are 2012s. Here's the advertised horsepower for the R1 Crossplane engine. And according to Google, the Aprilia actually makes a touch more power, coming in at 180. And both of these bikes have the exact same setup. They both have K&N air filters. They both have Akrapovic exhausts. They both have cat deletes. The Aprilia still has the butterfly valve in there, but it's tuned with an Aprilia race ECU. So that valve just stays open all the time. And the R1 does have an ECU Flash from Bouse Racing. So all in all, this comparison can't really get more even. I took them to the track on the same day, same weather conditions, same everything, same tire pressures. So this is a very fair comparison. And I've got the quarter-mile drag times to back everything up. The track doesn't lie. So before we look at some of that data from the track, just my thoughts on both of these bikes. Yes, the R1 is a lot heavier, but with the Crossplane engine, it makes a lot more torque in the mid RPM range where you're launching the bike. And I think that really helps you 60 foot and helps you get out of the hole. Check out this launch right here. I launched it just over 10,000 RPM and it was pretty much perfect. The front wheel came up just a little bit, but I still held wide open throttle, didn't come up too far where you had to feather the throttle. Really good launch, and it was relatively easy to do on this bike. For straight line drag racing, the extra weight of the R1 almost made it feel more comfortable and stable. And maybe that's just because I have a little bit more seat time on the R1, but still, it was a very comfortable bike to drag race. Very simple, and that was with traction control turned all the way off. No other rider assist features, more of a raw riding experience. And I like that. If you're an experienced rider, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Out of all the bikes I've raced, this R1 is now officially the fastest bike I've owned. Now moving on to the Aprilia, it has launch control, traction control, wheelie control, quick shifter. Like with all that tech on the bike, being 50 pounds lighter and making almost the same horsepower, like on paper, you would think the Aprilia would destroy the R1. It actually blew me away. It's about a half second slower in the quarter. My slowest run with the R1 all day was still faster than the Aprilia's best run. And I tried everything. I played with the settings all day. I tried all the rider assists on minimum, launch control on still. It was running that 10.9. I tried all rider assist features off, no traction control, no launch control, just to see if I could launch it a bit harder. and I was still running that around that 10.9. For me, the launch control and traction control, it still feels like it's pulling a little bit too much power, but that could also be that the RSV4 just doesn't have the mid-range torque that the R1 has. So it's 60 foot and launching it out of the hole, it's just a little bit more boggy. With the launch control and everything, this bike launches around 12,000 RPM. So a couple thousand RPM more in the launch than the R1, and it still bogs down harder than the R1 does. Once these bikes are up in the top RPM range, the mile an hour at the end of the quarter was almost identical. So that's a good indication that these bikes are making around the same amount of power. It's just the RSV4 doesn't have the torque that the R1 has to get off the line. And just a fun fact, if you turn your traction control off on the Aprilia and still try and use launch control, it does not activate. So I almost went down on the bike because I turned traction control, wheelie control, all that stuff off, and then tried to use launch control still, and everything was disabled. Like that launch didn't activate, and I basically redline dumped it, and it was a wild ride. So to me, the rider assist features on the Aprilia are pretty cool, but if you're an old school rider like me, it's a lot to get used to. And I almost like the more raw riding experience of the R1 better. So if you guys are curious how much of a difference an ECU Flash makes, this was one of my best runs with the R1 before I got it retuned. So this is the exact same setup, but just with a power commander. And this is my best time after the ECU Flash. So look at how much more mile an hour I picked up. That is a huge gain. And yeah, 60 foot's better. Literally everything is better. That 60 foot gain is a really good example of the mid torque that you pick up, the real usable power that you're gonna feel on the street. And about 0.3 of a second faster in the full quarter, that is also a huge gain. So for all you guys wondering if an ECU Flash is worth it or stick with a power commander, ECU Flash is way better. This is my very first pass of the day, so no experience, no nothing, just hopping on the bike and trying that tune out for the first time. And yeah, this is my slowest pass all day, and it's still way faster than my fastest pass previously. I'll show you a couple of these other ones just to kind of get a baseline average. So 10.6. Here's another run. So basically I was just getting a little bit better in the 60 foot. My launch was getting a little better, getting more familiar with the track and the bike. And yeah, just getting a little bit better all day. Now let's jump to the Aprilia. So this is my best run in the Aprilia, a 10.93. And look at how bad that 60 foot is. And that's with launch control on and all the traction control and everything on very minimum. And that was with no wheel spin at all. That 60 foot is horrible. But the mile an hour is about the same. So that makes me think that these bikes are still making the same top end power. After seeing multiple runs like this, I wanted to mess around with the rider assist features off to see if I could do it any better. With all the riding assist features off, this was my first pass, so ended up just blowing the tire off and getting pretty squirrely let out of it. So maybe the extra weight of the R1 helps it hook up a little bit better when you're trying to launch really aggressive. This was pretty much a red line dump and it just didn't work out. So then I just dropped my launch RPM a little bit lower, around that 12,000 RPM, kind of right where the launch control kicks in and does its thing normally. And my times were very similar to with launch control, but I couldn't quite beat all the rider assist features. So 10.98 there, you can see my 60 foot was actually a little bit better than with the launch control on, but just really didn't make that big of a difference. This is another one with launch control off, all traction controls off. So 60 foot was a little bit worse on this one. End result pretty much the same, 10.99. This was another pass, all rider assist features off. Still couldn't beat the rider assist features, unfortunately. So really didn't change much. I ran 10.9s all day, no matter what I tried. So if you're looking for a bike that's just consistent, the Aprilia was extremely consistent. 10.9s all day, no matter what I tried. Rider assist features on, off, all that stuff. 10.9 all day. So that's gonna be a really good bracket racing bike. I might try that again next weekend. But to sum up this video, I'm a little bit disappointed in the Aprilia. It's one of my slowest bikes. It actually is the slowest liter bike I've raced. Even my 06 R1, it ran a 10.7 at the track. So like, this Aprilia just doesn't have the grunt to get off the line. Even though it had one of the highest mile an hour at the end of the quarter out of all of my bikes, it ran the slowest. So that is proof that these RSV4s don't make great mid-range torque. They're a high-strung bike, you gotta keep the revs up. They're basically a MotoGP bike, right? Like, they're not really made to dog around down low. The launch control helps, but it's kind of just a band-aid for how gutless they are down low, if you want to put it that way. And then the R1's kind of the opposite. No rider assist features and just a ton of mid-range torque, and it launches really well. The weight of the bike, the power, everything, it just delivers it to the track relatively easy. And even without all the rider assist features, I actually enjoyed riding the R1 at the track more. And I was rewarded with faster track times. The Aprilia, where it would shine is circuit racing. So you get the RPMs up, you keep them there your whole lap, and it's so light and nimble, handles like an R6 basically, really good brakes on it. That's where the Aprilia is gonna shine. So it was a little out of its element here, but it's still really fun to test them in the real world and kind of get some real world results here for you guys. So I'm sorry I didn't get the best track footage, but I had a lot of fun making this video in person, and I hope you guys learned something from it and got a little bit of value. If you did, smash the like button. I know I was really surprised with the results. A little bit disappointed with the Aprilia, to be honest, but that's how she goes. That's real world testing for you. I'm pretty much launching the Aprilia as hard as I could. There's almost no way that front end wanted to come up. The R1 was almost the opposite. You knew the front end was gonna come up and it was your job to keep it down. So very different riding styles. But that's it for this comparison. If you guys have any other cool ideas to compare these two bikes head to head, different categories, anything like that, cool ideas, just drop them below and I'll try and read the comments. And if it's a unique or different idea, I'll try and make it happen. But until next time, guys, cheers.